For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places.
Hello and welcome to a presentation on the great controversy, the battle for your choice. This is the 10th presentation in the series and is entitled The Perfect Mirror. I want to remind you about the book, The Great Controversy, on which many of the thoughts and themes and ideas are based. I took them from the Bible and the Great Controversy. And I encourage you to try and get the book, The Great Controversy, and read it. It will be a blessing to you. I also want to remind you that at the end of each presentation, there will be contact details about how you can get a free copy of the abridged version of The Great Controversy. And it's entitled The Great Hope, a revealing look at the battle between good and evil and who wins. In our previous presentation, we looked at and saw that there was a cosmic battle going on between Satan and God, and it is over the character of God and the way he runs his government. In this presentation, we will be seeing what is perfect liberty, what is perfect freedom. Let's read about the perfect law of liberty. Follow on the screen with me. The perfect law of freedom. James 1 verse 25 says, "But whoso looketh into the perfect law of liberty," so there's a perfect law that gives freedom, "and continueth therein, he being not a forgetful hearer, but a doer of the work, this man shall be blessed in his deed." And James 2 verse 12 says, "So speak ye, and so do as they that shall be judged by the law of liberty." It's called the law of freedom, the law of love, the law of liberty. Psalms 119 verse 45 says, "And I will walk at liberty, for I seek thy precepts." God's law gives freedom. God's law gives liberty. The perfect law of freedom. In this presentation, we're also going to be looking into when was this perfect law of freedom given? Where was it given? Who gave it? How was this law given? And why was this perfect law of liberty given? Okay, when was the law first given? The law, God's character, love, as we have seen, has always existed because God himself has always existed. But for the created beings, the angels, and Adam and Eve, you and me. Well, up to Adam and Eve. It doesn't include you and me yet. It was given at their creation. When was the law first given? Psalms 40 verse 8 says, "I delight to do thy will, O my God. Yea, thy law is within my heart." What is the biblical heart again? It's not here, although the heart and the mind we know today works very intricately together. The heart, when the Bible speaks about the heart, it's your mind, it's your brain, it's the mind, where you make your choices, the frontal lobe. Thy law is within my heart. What is our hearts? Our minds. And this is where the law needs to be. Okay, so the law needs to be in our hearts. Where was the law given? It was written on their hearts, in their minds. It was hardwired into their hearts, their minds. Remember, we spoke about the brain and what a brain looks like, and the choices and the habits and the lifestyle and the character, and eventually this all leads to your destiny. And we saw that what a choice looks like under a high-powered microscope, and how it builds up to a habit a lifestyle and a character. Their characters, it was hardwired at their creation into their minds, their hearts, their brains. It was the propensities, their choices, their habits, their lifestyles to naturally do what was right. They knew the law of love. It was written in their hearts, but they were almost totally unaware of it because it was natural for them to do what was right and to keep it. Okay. This is just a quote from the author of The Great Controversy. Read with me on the screen. The law of God existed before man was created. When did the law of God exist? Before man was created. The angels were governed by it. The angels knew its principles and precepts. Satan fell because he transgressed the principles of God's government. And God's government is built and founded on his law. It's a description of his character. After Adam and Eve were created, God made known to them his law. It was not then written, but was rehearsed to them by Jehovah. The principles embodied in the Decalogue existed before the fall. The principles were there before the fall and were suited to the conditions of holy beings. After the fall, that's after sin, after Adam fell, these principles were not changed. Nothing was taken away from the law of God, but additional precepts, something needed to happen to get us back into this law. Additional precepts were given to meet man in his fallen state. On our hearts, on our minds, why is God's law no longer in our minds, in our hearts? This is where we need healing, our minds. This is where we need to have God's law. God's law needs to be in our hearts, in our minds. It was given and written down on 2 tablets of stone because we have forgotten them. They have left our natures and propensities to do what is right, and we now do the exact opposite. The law of liberty, needed to be spelt out for our need because of sin. We once again need to remember who and what God is, and what love is and were, and what was morally or universally right and wrong. These are 10 brief words, so short and simple that even a child can learn them, but they encompass every last single facet of our existence eternally. When was the law first given? Let's look at the next screen. When was the law first given? Adam and Eve, at their creation, had a knowledge of the law of God. I'll quote again from the author of The Great Controversy. They were acquainted with its claims upon them. They knew what was required for them to have life. Love is life. Its precepts were written down on their hearts. When man fell by transgression, the law was not changed, but a remedial system. An extra system was needed to help and get them back into the law. A remedial system was established to bring them back into the hedge of protection, into obedience. When was the law first given? I'll just read another quote. When Adam and Eve were created and placed in the Eden home, they had a knowledge of the law that was to govern them. Its precepts were imprinted on their hearts, in their minds, by God himself, by Jehovah himself, and they were acquainted with its claims upon them. Because of the transgression of the divine law, paradise was lost to man. The curse was pronounced upon the earth, and the reign of death commenced. Why is it no longer in our hearts? The law of God stayed behind and was forgotten. So when man stepped outside of the hedge of protection, he left God's law of love. God had to give on tables of stone a law describing what they'd left behind. And that law on stone needs to be back onto, I'm just going to go back onto the fleshy tables of our hearts, as we'll see shortly. We'll look into this a little bit more as we go along. Let's read a little bit more on the screen. From hearts of stone to hearts of flesh, Ezekiel 11 verse 19 says, And I will give them one heart, and I will put a new spirit within you, and I will take the stony heart out of their flesh, and will give them a stony heart out of the flesh, and will give them a heart of flesh. The heart of stone needs to become a heart of flesh. Ezekiel 36 verse 26 says, a new heart also will I give you. We need new hearts. We need new minds. We need to be renewed by the renewing of our minds. And a new spirit will I put within you, and I will take away the stony heart out of your flesh, and I will give you a heart of flesh. And 2 Corinthians 3 verse 3 says the same thought, or gives the thought along the same lines. For as much as ye are manifestly declared to be the epistle of Christ ministered by us, written not with ink. This is not talking about physical things, but with the Spirit of the living God, not in tables of stone, but in fleshy tables of the heart. Where does the Lord need to be? God's law, God's love needs to be in our hearts, and we need to be inside the hedge of protection. So what is the way back in? It can never happen without the door. Let's see how it happens. We stepped outside of the hedge of protection. We are outside. God gives the law on 2 tables of stone at Mount Sinai. This law, as we understand it and read it and start to love it, gets imprinted in our minds through love. And as a result of this, we, through only one way, the door, and we found in the previous lectures, what was the door? Jesus was the door. We can now get through the door back into the hedge of protection and have God's law written in our hearts. What does it mean to have God's law written in our hearts? It means that we have chosen, we want to do and obey God's law, not because we have to, but because we see the benefits of God's law. It is in our hearts, it becomes natural, we want to do it. Our natures and propensities have changed so that we now love God's law. What is the whole duty of man? Ecclesiastes 12 verse 13 says, let us hear the conclusion of the whole matter. Fear God, and this is a different kind of fear. This kind of fear is reverential fear that we're talking about, but we're not going to talk about the fear of God at this stage. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. The wisest man who ever lived said that, Solomon himself said that. Why? Because he knew to get back into the hedge of protection, this is what was needed. It is the whole duty of man to have God's law written in your heart. John 14 verse 15 says, if you love me, keep my commandments. True freedom, true love is found in agreeing that God is not harsh, severe, or arbitrary. His laws are good. They are there for a reason, a positive reason. And Jesus himself said, if you love me, keep my commandments, because in them you find love, you find life. We show our love to God by being obedient to him. If you love me, keep my commandments. What is the heaviest burden we can ever bear? On the screen I'm going to show you. It's the burden of sin. This is each one of us. We are carrying that burden. And in this burden of sin we find pain, suffering, guilt, death, shame, remorse, loneliness. In our planet, you just have to look around and you see the devastation in my own country. It's the worst place in the world to see the devastation of HIV and AIDS, cancer, heartache, hunger, earthquake. We've all been exposed to these things. Murder, rape, divorce, adultery. Nothing untested or not experienced has happened on this planet. There is nothing that we have not experienced or been exposed to on this planet that has in some or other way added or contributed to these emotions. I repeat, nothing the unimaginable has been done and tried. The amount of suffering out there is unimaginable. There's famines happening as we speak in Ethiopia and northeast parts of Africa. 10 million people need desperate food as we speak. The sea by 2050, the scientists are saying, are going to be devoid of life if we carry on at the present rate. The scientists are saying this. And this is as a result of this burden of sin. The earth is groaning under this burden, and so are you and me. There is nothing that we have not experienced or been exposed to on this planet. I repeat, nothing, the unimaginable, has been done. But let me show you the route of escape out of the problems of this planet. There is a way out. There is an ark prepared for you and me. Yes, that ark is Jesus. There is hope, and as part of Hope Channel, we want to bring you this hope. Obedience, we mentioned this. What is the yoke? Matthew 11 verse 29 says, "Take my yoke upon you and learn of me, for I am meek and lowly in heart, and ye shall find rest unto your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light." What is a yoke? In the old times, in the biblical times, this is how farmers used to plow the fields, by getting two oxen hooked together in a yoke, pulling the plow behind them. What is the yoke of Christ? The yoke of Christ is obedience. Obedience to what? To God, to His law. It is such a light burden because Jesus helps us to carry it. And compared to the burden of sin and all the pain and suffering that sin causes, it is very light. How can it be a heavy burden to not kill someone, or not to steal from someone, or not to commit adultery? Is this difficult? In this yoke, I am pulling a very small yoke. Jesus is giving me the power to just pull that little bit. He pulls us through. The yoke is easy because Jesus is yoked in with me and does almost all of the hard work. And the burden is light because it is nothing compared to the burden of sin. What are God's commandments? We looked at this in a previous lecture. If somebody loved the law, it was David. And as I pointed out, David refers to it using 7 different terms: the law, commandments, precepts, statutes, judgments, testimonies, thy words. In Psalms 119, he goes from specific, he specifically mentions the law, the commandments, to a more general term, thy word. But it is always speaking in the context of love, God's commandment, a description of who God is, God's law. The word law is used 25 times. The word commandment about 21 times, and I just checked this. It's a rough estimate because when you start using different versions, they use different terms sometimes too. But using the King James, this is what I based it on. The law is used 25 times. The word commandments about 21 times. The precepts about 21 times. The statutes about 22 times. Judgments about 22 times. Testimonies 20 times. Thy word about 34 times. And all variations was over 160. Thy word. David talks about thy word, okay, which is the law. Follow with me on the screen. The law of God was not given to the Jews alone. It is of worldwide and perpetual obligation. It is moral law. It is worldwide. It is universally of universal obligation. Its 10 precepts are like a chain of 10 links. If one is broken, the chain becomes worthless. Not a single precept can be revoked or changed to save the transgressor. The second quote that I'm quoting from the author of The Great Controversy: God requires of his subjects obedience, not to 9/10 of the law, but to every one of the 10 precepts, every last single one. They are like 10 links in a chain. If one link is broken, the chain is of no value. The violation of one commandment makes us commandment breakers. And we see this in the New Testament where I think it's James that says, if you've broken one, you've broken them all. And we must yield willing obedience to all the precepts of Jehovah if we would be true commandment keepers. For he that offendeth in one part is guilty of all. Okay, 10 links in a chain. That chain is like the hedge. It is the hedge. It protects us. It's keeping us. On the one side, we have peace, happiness, and righteousness. On the other side of those links of chain that are keeping us in is pain, suffering, and death, the 10 links in the chain. Us, all free moral agents, are protected from one side or the other by this hedge of protection, the 10 links in the chain. Okay, so let's break a link and see what happens. We could break any one of the 10, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and we'll be talking about these links a little bit further. But let's break the fourth link. There we go. The fourth link is taken out. It was transgressed. It was broken. A choice was cognitively made to not to break that link. The chain falls apart, and man, or the being or the person that broke that link, falls into pain, suffering, and death. And this is a description of what's happened with Adam and Eve and all the human race up to the present time. Okay, that's the one analogy that we use, the broken links, the 10 links. Let's look at another analogy. We've looked at the hedge of protection, describing God's law, the law of love, the law of life. We've looked at the 10 links. You break one, the chain is useless. One more analogy. How do I see myself? I cannot see myself. I actually think I look quite good, you know. Is there a tool to see what I really look like? And the answer is yes, of course there is. It's called a mirror. What is the mirror? Yes, it is the first tool used to bring me to Christ. It shows me my condition. Let's see what James says. James 1 verse 23 says, "For if anyone is a hearer of the word and not a doer," you must hear, but you, more importantly, you must do what you hear. "He is like a man looking at his natural face in a mirror. For he sees himself and goes away and immediately forgets what kind of man he was." In the original King James, I think it says a looking glass. But in other versions, it uses the word mirror, and I'll put the word mirror in there as well. You'll find this if you go through different versions. "For he sees himself and goes away and immediately forgets what kind of man he was. But he who looks," and we spoke about it in the beginning, "into the perfect law of freedom," that perfect law of freedom. We actually spoke about this in the previous presentation. "And continues, not being a hearer who forgets, but a doer of the work. This man will be blessed in what he does." Okay, there's two faces and two mirrors. So I go and find a mirror and I have a good look. Okay, so my face is dirty. I don't like what I see. It shows me what I'm like. It shows me that I'm full of sin. It shows me that I must die. But it cannot take one speck of dirt off me. The mirror condemns me and makes me feel terrible. But thank God for this. If you did not ever realize your sinful condition, if you never felt bad, contrition for sin, you would never ever have a need to come to Jesus. This is the purpose of the law, the hedge of protection, the mirror. As you will see, it is one of the very first steps to coming to Jesus. You must realize your condition and need of a Savior. Okay, so what options do you now have? Let's look at the options we now have. You've realized you're dirty. From this point onwards, people mostly get it all wrong. They get it wrong as to what to do to get rid of sin. They've seen themselves in the mirror, they've seen there's dirt, and now they've got to make a choice. What do I now do? And this is where they get it wrong. They've looked into the perfect law of liberty, and they've seen their condition. To get rid of the dirt, this is how some try to go about doing it. The first thing that some people try, they try to wash their face with the mirror, the law. They take the law and they try to use the law to clean themselves. This is called legalism. It's a form of trying to get yourself into the hedge of protection. It's by works. And we know there's only one way into the hedge of protection. It's through the door, through Jesus Christ. I cannot do it. You cannot do it except through Jesus. So using the law is not going to save us. And by the way, nobody can use the law to do it. People think they can, but they cannot. The second way that they try to get rid of the dirt is to try to wash the face that they see in the mirror. They see the mirror, so they're trying to wash the face in the mirror. They are trying to alter the law. They are trying to change the law. The third way that they try to do it, they try to wash the face in the mirror. They blame the law. The law is bad because it's making me feel bad. It's showing me my problem, so the law is bad. And then the fourth way is out of guilt and frustration, they even try to destroy the mirror. They punch the mirror, they break it, they take a hammer, and they try to wash the image of their face in the mirror. They try to alter the function of the law, or out of guilt and frustration, they even try to destroy the mirror. They try to get rid of or destroy the law. In our next presentation, we will be looking even deeper into the 10 links that form a chain. If you break one link in a chain, the whole chain is useless. We will discover that some links have been broken and tried to be replaced. Friends, I now even need to remind you that we are in a cosmic battle called the Great Controversy. And this battle is the battle for your choice. Right now, I want to invite you to make some choices with me, which are based on this presentation. The first choice. Choose to realize that the perfect mirror is needed to show you that what you are really like. Only the mirror points out our need, and it shows us that we need Jesus. The second choice, I invite you to choose to realize that you are really dirty and stained all over with selfishness. Selfishness inherently inside, sin. Realize that sin condemns you to death. And the third choice I invite you to make is choose to not be mad with the mirror, God's Lord, which is the hedge of protection. But thank God that the mirror points you to the solution, Jesus. Thank you for listening, and until next time, God bless and goodbye.